Good morning, everybody. My apologies. I was having some technical difficulties with the internet at my house. So that is the result. This is the result of the delay. My heartfelt apologies. But welcome. We're so delighted that you are here. Sarah, I am going to turn this over to you really quickly because everyone's been waiting for your helpful advice and information. And I am going to send an email to all of the people who have registered, letting them know that this is indeed happening and they should join us. Sound good?
Great. Good morning, Jess. Good morning, everybody. It's good to see you all. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you. Alrighty. So I'm Sarah Sargent. I'm the Small Business Program Manager at Valley CDC. I also, Dee Dice is here as well today. She is a consultant who works with some of our clients at Valley. The purpose of this presentation is to talk to you about the state level grants that have come out of the ARPA funds for businesses impacted by COVID. This presentation is pretty text heavy, which isn't my favorite. So I've tried to create this so that after this presentation, Jess will send everybody the slide deck so you have it as a resource when applying for the grants yourself. And if you have any questions. So out of the ARPA funds, the state has set aside $75 million for small businesses. They have put it into two different grants. One that is the new applicant grant, that is a pool of $25 million. And another that is the inclusive grant for $50 million. So today we're going to talk about the overview of both of them, the eligibility criteria around both. There's just a couple differences. How to calculate the number of full-time employees, because part-timers and 1099 contractors can be turned into an equivalent of a full-time. Approved use of funds, the application process, the documents needed, and then the timeline and next steps that you might take. So as I mentioned, there are two grants, one the new applicant with a total of $25 million and the inclusive with $50 million. In each, you can receive between $10,000 and $75,000. It's about 3 months of annualized revenue or expenses for the business that's being given out if you are awarded funds. The differences between the new applicant and the inclusive are that the new applicant is for businesses negatively impacted by COVID that have not previously received financial relief from MGC's COVID-19 program. So that does, if somebody has applied for another grant opportunity through MGCC, such as the digital grant or Biz Empower, you are totally fine. You can still apply if you had not gotten the COVID-19 relief. If you receive PPP or EIDL, but not MGCC COVID-19 relief, you are eligible for the new applicant one. They're going to give prioritization to businesses established after 6/30/2019. And then the inclusive grant, which is the pool of $50 million, is for businesses focused on reaching groups that are predominantly made of social and economically disadvantaged, underrepresented groups. If you are owned by a minority, a woman, a veteran, disabled individuals, or identify as part of the LGBTQ+ community. There will be a little bit of priority given to those located in a gateway city. All right, so here begins the real text heavy. New applicant grant eligibility. Business has not previously received financial relief from MGCC. Business did not qualify for previous grants due to lack of revenue loss in the calendar year of 2020. What is similar about all of both grants is that you have to be a Massachusetts base. You have your address on your federal tax return must be within Massachusetts. You have to be a for-profit. It has to be owned by individuals. So you couldn't be a business that has part ownership as individuals and is also owned by another business. You must have a social security number or a tax identification number. Business must currently have between 2 and 50 full-time employees. And so this is where the individual business owner counts as one. In some instances, if a spouse or partner has been working in the business, they may count as the second. But what we're really trying to make sure people understand is that if you have part-time or 1099 contractors working for you, there is a calculation I will get to in a little bit to make them turn their hours into what might be equivalent of 1 or more full-time employees. Businesses must have had a minimum of $40,000 in expenses based on your 2020 federal business tax return, and revenues between $40,000 and 2.5. Now, again, this is another section that is catching people and they're automatically thinking they don't qualify. We're in 2022 and a lot has happened since 2020 to now. So if you remember back to 2020, if you were closed at any point in time, we are looking to annualize your revenue and annualize your expenses, which means we have a calculation for that too. So just because your tax return doesn't have that minimum number of 40,000, we want to check that calculation, which I'll show you as well. Business must currently be in operation and your business must have been established prior to 9/30/2020. And the business must be in good standing with federal, state, and city or town. So the inclusive grant, the difference here is that you must meet at least one of the following criteria: minority-owned, woman-owned, veteran-owned, owned by someone who identifies as disabled, owned by someone who identifies as LGBTQ+, or focused on reaching markets predominantly made up of socially and economically disadvantaged and historically underrepresented groups. Again, it must be based in Massachusetts and negatively impacted by COVID. Business tax return has your business address on it. In Massachusetts, it's for profit, owned by individuals. And then it goes through the 2 to 50 full-time employees again, and the minimum of 40,000 in revenue and expenses. And business must have been established prior to 9/30/2020. So yeah. Yes, great question, Lexi. You can apply for both. The thing that I'm telling anybody who is eligible for both to apply for both, because it just increases where your chances potentially, and also it leaves it up to MGCC to determine which pool of money they take your funds that they're going to give you from. You can only receive funding from one or the other, which MGCC would distinguish where you're receiving the funds from, but there isn't any harm in applying for both. All right, so full-time employee calculator. Add all employee W-2 salary workers and 1099 contract hours worked in 1 week and divide it by 40. And you would round up the resulting number to the nearest whole number. So I've given a couple examples here. The first one is just based off hours, which if you had employees, part-time, full-time, and 1099, and there was a total of 300 hours, divided by 40, gives you 7.5. which they're saying you would have equivalent of 8 full-time employees. Another example would be you have an owner, which counts as the first person, and then you had 2 1099 contractors, each work 20 hours in a week, is equivalent to 2 full-time employees. Here comes how to annualize revenue and expenses. So this is for businesses that didn't report 12 months of revenue in fiscal year 2020. So for any reason, let's say you're actually a newer business that started in October or September, you can still apply for this grant as long as, well, if you started prior to 9/30/2020, you can apply for this grant. But let's say you're only open and operating for any reason for 6 months out of the year instead of a full 12 due to COVID impact. You would take your revenues from your 2020 federal tax return or your Schedule C, and you would divide that revenue amount by the actual number of months you were in business and open and operating. And then you would multiply those results by 12. And this ends up being your total annualized revenue. So my example at the bottom is 20,000 in revenue divided over 4 months because it's all I was open and operating. That's $5,000 on average a month. If you multiply it by 12, my annualized revenue is $60,000, and that exceeds the minimum 40. You would use the same exact formula for your expenses as well. So you can see that you might be able to hit the minimum of 40 fairly easily. Ineligible businesses, those who didn't experience negative economic impact, though I'm not sure who hasn't. Business owners cannot hold an ownership interest in any other business applying for this grant. So only if you have multiple businesses that you have ownership in, you can only apply for one. Businesses owned in whole or part by corporations. You have to be 18 or older, business owned by somebody. You'll see that if you're part of political or lobbying activities, you can't be a franchise with more than 3 locations, no real estate, cannabis, nonprofit, membership service organizations, social clubs, or government owned. Your approved use of funds is for employee payroll and benefit costs, cost of trying to retain or bring in employees, business mortgage or rent, utilities, interest or other obligations incurred after March 3rd of 2021. So I actually have some clients who have interest on EIDL that they got after March 3rd of 2021 that they could use this on. Operating costs as a result of COVID-19 and measures taken to contain the spread. Costs to enhance outdoor spaces for COVID-19 mitigation, such as restaurant patios, or if you had outside classrooms, things along those lines that you were trying to do. The one thing to make sure is that you're not actually duplicating expenses. So if PPP or EIDL covered, say, payroll for the month of January, you can't then say that the funds for this are also covering the January payroll. So you just need to kind of look at how your cash flow and where what is being spent where. Non-approved uses of fund, you can't go and purchase real property, construction activities, lobbying, depositing funds into a pension fund, rainy day, debt incurred after March 3rd of 21, satisfaction of any obligation arising under or pursuant to settlement agreements, judgments, if the business did not experience negative impact from COVID. So those are the main things. Your question about can funds be used to help employees to be able to work from home? What do you mean by that? Can they come off mute? So in this case, what I would probably suggest is that what you typically spend on your payroll, if awarded these funds, you would then just actually use what your cash flow is coming in as revenue to cover the providing equipment and laptops, and take the money from here as your payroll coverage. As long as you can show receipts or stubs that work. Yep. So application, you can apply directly online at empoweringsmallbusiness.org, which is MGC's website. They are using Submittable for the application platform. It's fairly easy to log in. Some of you might already have accounts from previous grants you may have been working on. In the application, you can actually invite a collaborator. So I've shown a picture over here on the right-hand side with the green arrow that shows you how you could invite a collaborator. You could invite myself or Dee to be a collaborator. And then if you have any questions or would like us to review your application prior to you submitting, we actually then can go in and see it. We wouldn't be making any changes. We would just be able to see and answer questions for you or provide pointers. There is also a spot in the application to list what is called an SBTA. That is a small business technical assistance. And if you've worked with a consultant at Valley to apply, you can put our name in there as well. They have said that that helps a little bit, just so that they know that you worked with somebody and understanding the process. And then applications opened on February 23rd, and you have until April 4th at 11:59 p.m. to apply. I am really encouraging everybody to try and get everything together and look at what is required. And you don't actually, it doesn't matter if you submit today or you submit on April 4th. It is not a rolling grant. They will not start reviewing for who is going to be dispersed funds until after April 4th. So don't feel panicked about, I have to get it in, so I'm at the top. Part of the application process as well is that you're going to need documents. You will need 2020 federal business tax return, your 2020 federal personal tax returns, IRS W-9 form, certificate of good standing with Massachusetts Secretary of State office. And that goes if you're an S Corp, that you would be able to, or LLC, to get those. Business certificate you can get from the town if you're a sole proprietor or doing business as. Photo ID, and then if applicable, payment plans for federal, state, and or local business or personal taxes. So your timeline and next steps: determine if you're eligible based off the criteria. You might be eligible for one and not the other, or you might be eligible for both. Again, if you are eligible for both, I encourage you to apply for both, as it just gives you a chance to, who knows where MGCC would pull the funding from for you. Start collecting all the documents needed, and then apply online and submit your application on or before April 4th at 11:59 p.m. So here, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Here's also my contact information. This is kind of a fast and furious way of trying to get as much information about these grants. And we know that individuals will have specific questions that have to do with their business, as every business is unique. So I'm happy to answer questions now, and I'm also happy for you to reach out and just talk to me about your situation too.
Sarah, would you mind if I made a couple of comments?
Yeah, absolutely, Dee, go for it.
So I just want to recognize that this, unlike some of the other MGCC grants, you do not need someone from a small business association to apply with. You can apply by yourself. But there's a couple areas that do have some leeway that people typically are having some questions about. And Sarah and I were just on a meeting last night with other technical assistance providers, and we also have questions. So the three areas of that have a little bit of leeway are, they ask, how many months were you in operation in 2020? Okay, and so the question is, if you have a retail store, does that mean your store was closed, but you were still online? You know, the definition of operating is nebulous. And I think it's meant to be that way. They're not defining, this means that means this. That's your definition of open. Okay, so if your primary source of income is retail and you were closed, but you did sell it a little bit online, then you might say, okay, I was closed, I was not operating. So that is your decision about that. There's not a hard, fast rule about that. The other area in the inclusive one, there's not going to be a certification that you're a women-owned, disadvantaged, LGBTQ. That's all self-certified. So if you're in one of those categories, you don't need to prove it. Okay, so don't worry about that. And then the full-time employee situation, they're not asking for 1099s, although it may be on your tax return. So there are several questions, and everybody's, like Sarah said, everybody's business is a little bit different. Well, I hire some people during a peak season because this is, a seasonal business, or, this is when things happen in my business. They're not asking for any of that. They're asking for you to make the definition about, do you have 2 or more full-time employees? So those 3 areas have been there've been a lot of questions about, and there hasn't been further definition from MGCC about. So it's up to you to really, look at your business and make an honest answer and apply as needed. So would you agree with that, Sarah? Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody is a little different. And then also at the end of the day, we're saying if you're kind of in this gray area, apply and allow MGCC to be the one to determine if you get the funding or not.
The other thing is, some people say, like, I don't know if I got MGCC grants. There was such a fast and furious, PPP, EIDL, like, did I get an MGCC? Was what I got from MGCC? Basically, they'll find out if you did or not. So just apply. Basically what we're saying is apply. And then they'll be making decisions after that. So,
and Anita has a question here about expected timeline of receiving funds. We have heard that they're supposed to disperse funds in May. The other thing about the whole timeline here, I said that, applying by April, you don't need to hurry up and get in the queue. If you do submit now, the only advantage you may have is they are reviewing applications to just make sure all the documents are there. So if you don't have something, they'll reach out to you and say your application isn't actually completed, so that you can get them that information. So that's hopefully making sure that the program not delaying when they disperse the funds. And yes, you can apply for both if you're eligible for both. You would just receive funding from one if you were awarded funds.
Looks like Lexi has a question.
Hi, everybody. I have only gotten as far as the first page of the grant application so far. Can you describe some of the questions that we're sort of up against once we get into this document? I'm wondering, are these like long narrative answers? Are we just sort of hunting, pecking from our tax returns? What do we need to keep in mind?
So there's a couple things. You can always sign in, or once you've done, you can hit apply. And if you make it past this like first initial survey section, which is essentially making sure that you are eligible based off the criteria, then it opens up a full round of all of the questions. You can always go save and go back in at any point in time. but it really is unlike other grants. It is like yes, no questions.
Yeah,
And then
fairly
like,
easy.
it's take from your tax return this number, put it in here. But the thing that is getting people is that read the financial questions very carefully, because it will ask you for annualized in one place and then just ask you for your gross revenue in another. So just make sure you're reading carefully. And like I said, you can save and go back in at any point. So you could start it today and not finish it for another week or two, just because you're trying to collect stuff.
And Sarah, as far as I understand, there really aren't any narratives.
There is one spot that is actually one other spot that there's a little catch right now. There's only 100 words for the new applicant to explain your impact. And actually on the inclusive grant, which they are trying to fix on the platform side, there's only 100 characters. So essentially it's like COVID sucked. Like,
Yeah.
it's very like you have so little to actually put there. So don't focus on like, you're not going to have this huge big narrative. And again, all of us helping clients apply, this is like the easiest and best grant we've seen so far this whole process.
I think they've learned from all the other grants, like just give us something easy, as if business owners, don't have enough going on.
Right.
So
Looks like Dr. Salisbury has a question. You want to?
Yeah. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Hey, Dee. Hey, Sarah.
Hi.
So I think you answered my question, Sarah, as far as it being pretty straightforward, the application process. And then also, I know this is going to be a relative question, but what do you think the time commitment would be outside of just making sure you have your documents ready to fill it in? What would you estimate the time commitment would be to filling out the application?
I feel like if you have your documents like ready and you understand your tax return and follow the directions, you probably could do it in an hour.
Okay.
I mean, realistically, but if you are somebody that gets in there and you start going, oh, I don't know if this is me, your gray is not, you're not a fan of gray, it will take you longer because you're going to sit there and try and decide what answer to put. And also, I think there's a little of like, well, I don't want to be dishonest, but I'm not really sure. And it's like, go with your gut instinct at this point is what I'm telling people.
Okay, thank you so much. This what I'm going to say is probably going to be politically incorrect, and I know we're being recorded, but that is such a woman way of dealing with things, of second guessing ourselves and the ambiguity about the shades of gray. We're always doubting as far as, if we should say this or say that. And so I am trying to unlearn that pattern of behavior and just go through and trust my gut and let the cards fall where they may. So if I offended anybody, my apologies, but I just know working with women and coaching women and executives on many levels, that's something that we struggle with all the time. So
yeah.
Thanks, Leslie.
Looks like Amanda has a question there in chat.
Yeah, how long is a certificate of good standing good for since it is dated, and also the business certificate? So I'm going to read this directly from here. So certificate of good standing is required if your business is an LLC, partnership, or corporation. So if you are a sole prop or doing business as, you do not need a certificate of good standing from the state because you wouldn't actually have one. They are good for 12 months, or they are looking for one that is good within the last 12 months. So it's unexpired right now. And you can, if you don't have one right now, I would say that's your first step because it can take a little bit of time to get them. And then the business certificate is required if your business is a sole prop or general partnership. And you can just get that straight at the city, and it's fairly easy. You just call the clerk's office and get it. And as long as it is current, you should be fine. I'm going to put my The email is also in the chat, just so you have it, and then Jess will send with the slide deck too.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I feel like I'm triage right now for all the questions, so just keep them coming. People will send me an email with like 20 questions asking me different things. We're just replying as fast as we can based off what we're getting. Also have enough time, and I'm happy to work over hours right now to make sure people who want to apply and need to apply are getting the information they need. So please reach out if you have any questions. If I can't answer it, Dee and I will both try and figure out where to get the answer from too.
Does anybody else have any further questions? There's no such thing as a question that isn't awesome, because chances are if you ask it, someone else is thinking it and thinking, I'll just send Sarah an email later. All right. Sarah or Dee, do you have any comments that you'd like to offer to wrap things up?
Well, I think know that Valley is available for individual coaching really at any time. I mean, we have now on our website, you know, a simple form to fill out. It'll go directly to Sarah. And if you know anyone or yourself that needs a little advice, hand-holding, or any part of it, you know, Valley is available to do that.
Well, I want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank Florence Bank for sponsoring this event. They're always doing great things for our community. And I want to say so many thank yous to Sarah and Dee, not only for putting this information together, but for your consistent, wise, and grounded advice and support to the small business community during these many, always, but particularly during the roller coaster that COVID and the pandemic has provided to all of us. It's been quite a ride, and I think I can easily speak for everyone and say we are looking forward to sunshine and being outdoors and the end of all of this. Whatever it will come. I would also like to thank you all for your patience this morning. Sometimes working from home is amazing, and sometimes your internet doesn't work and you're a lunatic and you're trying to get 2 teenage boys out the door. So my apologies, huge, giant apologies. Thank you so much for your patience. I will make sure to send out the recording and Sarah's PowerPoint so that we have this information. We will also post it on our website, and I imagine Valley may do something similar so that this information is available. So if you're talking to people, colleagues, friends, neighbors that have similar questions, we will have this resource available. And as always, you can reach out to me as well. My email is easy, jessica@northamptonchamber.com. And I promise I'm much more punctual most of the time. So
I would also encourage everybody to get on Valley's email newsletter because there are so many things happening in small business alone, but also, you know, with Valley and our other areas that Sarah's been great about, you know, regularly sending out emails that have these grants in them and other things that will be helpful for business owners.
Likewise, head over to Northampton Chamber and feel free to sign up for our community connector and know that that is also a great resource. And unless anybody has any wrap up comments or ideas or questions, you all can take the last 20 minutes and start the application for the grant.